Talpisi. Namaste everyone, good morning and welcome. Welcome to Vishwa Talks. My name is Srivani and I thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those of you who have attended a Vishwa Talk before, a very warm welcome to you. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, here's a little bit about us. Vishwa Talks is a space to expand the horizons of our minds. Every webinar, we call experts from different domains to discuss and examine opinions, issues, problems, and perspectives. Each webinar is an interactive session where we all walk away with more respect for each other and a deeper understanding of the topic at hand. Vishwa Talks is a free live webinar where we believe it should be an open forum for all to seek value and make a difference in our lives. Today, on Vishwa Talks, in collaboration with Teacher Plus, we discuss peace education. Peace is the brave, loud, ultimate response to the notion that violence provides any sustainable solutions for the battles of our world, especially in a time when we have the Ukraine war going on and has been going on for quite some time. And life has become where, violence is the solution to most issues. We need to bring back this notion back to our schools. Schools play a very vital role, not only to provide knowledge and skill, but also to form social and cultural values, norms, attitudes, dispositions, and of course, further aims of peace. To throw light in this pertinent topic of today's time, we have Urmi Chanda, a peace builder, research scholar, journalist, and a senior program coordinator of the India programs at Seeds of Peace. Urmi is a culturist. She has been a journalist for over 13 years. She's committed to peace building. She's especially passionate about interfaith harmony and believes in the power of art and dialogue for driving social impact and change. Usha Raman is the editor of Teacher Plus, a monthly magazine aimed at school teachers and the wider education community. She's a professor of media studies at the University of Hyderabad, where she teaches and researches in the area of digital culture, health, communication, and journalism pedagogy. We are honored to have you on Vishwa Talks. Before we get started, I would like to inform our audience that our speaker will be taking questions from you after our main talk. So please leave your questions in the chat box or raise a hand, and we will allow you to ask your questions in person. Now, without further ado, I may invite our speakers to please start today's Vishwa Talks.
Thank you, Srivani, for that introduction, and thanks to everybody who's here this morning. I know Saturday mornings can be difficult, and I really appreciate your time. I think we do have a very important topic to discuss, particularly in light of everything that is going around us, wars happening, continued conflict over resources, identities, and so on. So I'd just like to start off before I hand it over to Urmi with a little bit of background. Many years ago, I watched a German film called The Wave, in which a school teacher creates an experiment that's meant to be a cautionary tale, but it goes terribly wrong. And what he wanted to do was to show his students that the horrors of the Holocaust and the climate that caused it could happen again. All it took was a seed of distrust watered by prejudice and insecurity, and things can go terribly wrong. And of course, we all know that this can be true. We live today in an environment that's fraught with insecurities of many kinds. There's competition over resources, there's conflict over who belongs to this nation and places and who doesn't, who has claim over citizenship, who doesn't, who has ownership of land, and which identities are legitimate. It seems no matter how much progress we make in economic or social terms, these battles over land, identity, resources, legitimacy, authority continue to rage. But then there's always space for and reason for hope. The fact that so many of us, in fact, the majority, do live in peace with respect and tolerance, curiosity, and empathy for others suggests that war and conflict is not inevitable, that there does reside in human nature an instinct for peace, for collaboration, and for cooperation. Yet there are many forces that seek to subdue this instinct and instead encourage competition, not just in the so-called healthy ways that motivate us to do better, but in the negative ways that lead to a search for dominance through subjugation and marginalization. How then do we resist these forces and instead nurture the instinct for peace? What are the spaces where this is possible and where hope can be realized? Schools are among those spaces of hope, and children, as the cliche goes, are our hope for the future. Can we build an attitude of peace where the default is empathy and cooperation? What does it take for those seeds to be sown? I'm a great believer in the transformative power of the classroom, an education delivered with conviction. And as that teacher in the German film showed, this power can be used both for destructive and constructive ends. We're here today to talk about the potential of an educational approach that sows the seeds for peace. As Walter Lippmann said, wars begin in the minds of men, but if so, peace too can be engendered in the minds of humans. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Urmi Chanda, as Shivani explained, is a peace educator and is joining us today, in fact, from a region that's associated, unfortunately, with conflict just as much as it is associated with breathtaking beauty. That's Kashmir. So over to you, Urmi.
Thanks so much, thank you, Shivani, and thanks to everyone who's here today. Apologies if there are disturbances. I'm joining from the Srinagar airport at the moment. I had unexpectedly, but this is not an opportunity I would have missed. So I'm speaking to you from here. So if there are, and I have a hard stop at 12:15 because I have a flight to catch after this. So my apologies right at the beginning. We can connect later. So while Shivani gave a little bit of an introduction about me, I'm going to take it a little bit further. And by way of introducing myself, I will help you understand the concept that is extracurricular and then slowly move towards the curriculum, because we're talking about peace in the context of education today. So Seeds of Peace is an organization that's about 30 years old, for those who do not know. It's based in the US and it was started by a journalist named John Wallet. So after years in journalism, he realized that, constantly reporting about conflict and diplomacy efforts at a certain level is my video not, can it not be seen? I can.
Yeah, maybe you can turn it on and off again. Sometimes that works.
Now you see me now? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's the bandwidth here. So yes, I was saying, so Seeds of Peace was started by this journalist who finally, after years in journalism and being jaded by the way war and peace is approached conventionally, he thought, peace has to be thought of and implemented at a much earlier level in life, rather than adults fighting wars and then talking about it and then trying to trash it out. So he took teenagers from an area of conflict that has been around for many, many years, Israel and Palestine. So he took some teenagers from Israel, he took some from Palestine, he took them to a camp in this beautiful property in Maine in the US. And for 20 days, these students lived with each other as peers, getting to know each other on the human level. And the kind of activities that are designed in these camps, they foster, and there's deep dialogue every single day. And, the interesting concept to me when I first joined the organization and first learned about it was how they create these, among many other things they do, they create this thing called color games. So they mix up these batches of students and then redivide them into a blue team and a green team. And then they are made to play these competitive games, so that there is an allegiance built on the basis of the team. So the blue team builds a strong allegiance, there's an in-grouping that happens, and the same happens with the green team. But these are mixed nationality kids, there are Israelis and Palestinians in the blue team, and at the end of the day, there are these games and competition is drummed up in a big way, in a purposeful manner. And then after the games, there's a debriefing done where the students are shown how identity switch can happen, depending on which group you think you belong in. So within a span of 20 days, if your identity and your loyalty can shift and you can become so aggressive towards each other in the throes of that game. And then, so imagine what national identities can do, what religious identities can do. But ultimately, these are all identities. But once you've known these people at the human level, then it's very difficult to think of them as enemies. So, which is why the Seeds of Peace camp, which has been going on for 30 years, every year, there's almost 100 students that participate from across the world. And it leaves a very long-lasting impact, because these children are in the most impressionable time of their lives. And going through a transformative experience like this, where you're practically living with what you think you're told is the enemy, so living with them, spending so much time with them, being in deep dialogue with them over issues that are of importance, this really transforms them. So that's the background of what Seeds of Peace does, and that's a paradigm. I don't see why we can't follow this in schools either. At a smaller level, suppose we mix communities up, of religious identities, of class identities, and through the exercises like these within our schools. So that's one approach. But I'm going to now start the presentation. Let me share my screen, and someone please let me know if you can see it. Can you see? Usha, can you see my screen?
No, I can't see the screen yet. So I'm thinking, if you have low bandwidth, would it help for one of us? Oh, now I can see it. Yes, I can see it.
Okay, it's come?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start. At any time, if it goes off, just someone prompt me and maybe you all can take over. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's actually on slide 3 right now. So you may want to go back.
No, it's slow. I've moved to slide 1, but it's probably taking a little time. Has it come to slide 1 now?
Not on my screen. Yeah, yes, it's good now.
Yes, Sudeepji, I'm really sorry because I'm in the airport, like I said. There is disturbance, but I'm going to try my best. I hope I'm audible at least.
Yes, you're audible.
Oh. Okay. So we are going to look at peace pedagogy within the classroom context today.
Video is not visible. And video is not.
Okay.
But in fact, since you have the slides up, maybe to preserve bandwidth, it would be better to keep your video off.
Stop my video.
Just speak. Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. So, yes. What is peace education then? We're talking about peace education today. A Peace Insight definition says peace education promotes the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to help people prevent conflict occurring, resolve conflicts peacefully, or create conditions for peace. So while that is an all-encompassing definition of peace education, my question to which I want you all to think over. I'm not going to take answers at the moment, but I'm going to ask each of you, what does peace mean to you? Because peace is also an extremely it's a ephemeral concept, so I want, before I go off to the next slide, just think in your mind what peace means to you, and then we'll try to make the connections between what we teach when we say we want to teach peace education and what it is in our minds, right? So here are some definitions of peace. Peace, in the most popular definition being, is a situation or a period of time in which there is no war or violence in a country or an area. The second definition is, it's a state of harmony between people or groups. And the third is that it's an absence of mental anxiety or a calm state. So the third one, as you will notice, is a personal definition of peace, while the other two are social definitions of peace. But when we say peace, I think most of us think of the first first definition. That's what comes to mind. The absence of war. Now, which brings me to the concepts of positive and negative peace. Um, I, I'm coming out because I'm seeing how many of us here are familiar with how many of us are familiar with Johann Galtung? You can raise your hands by way of answer or nod your heads if you all are familiar. Vasudha, hand up, Usha. So, not many of us. So, I'm going to give a little bit of a background because Johan Galtung is a Norwegian sociologist who's the founder of peace studies. He's the one. He's 91 years old as of today, and he's one of the most prominent voices who created this area of education called peace education. So he defines. When I said the first definition of peace that comes to mind is absence of violence. That is what Johan Galtung has called negative peace, right? That it is the absence of violence or fear of violence. There's a comment there. Anyway, so that is negative peace, and for most of us, that's enough. But when we say we want to impart peace education to our students, the idea or the objective should be to move towards what Galtung calls positive peace, which is the attitudes, the institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. Because most of our, civil societies' approach towards peace building is usually to do with solving of a conflict that already exists. We are not doing enough to prevent conflict from happening. What we need to create is a culture of peace, which is what the positive peace. That's what it comprises. I'm moving on to the next slide, which then brings me to Galtung's violence triangle.
Slide needs to move.
This is an extreme.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now we can
Yeah.
see the slide.
The yes. So the as a corollary to what Galton says about the positive and negative piece, the violence triangle is extremely important to know and understand because that shapes our attitude about what is necessary and what is not. I come from, I'm taking the case of India today. Very often we hear the argument that India kahan hai, there is no violence, there's no problem, unlike say Israel Palestine, and unlike say Russia Ukraine, we are not fighting with anyone. Internal violence also is not really visible, not often. We have our riots every now and then, but it's not a constant, in the way it is in many countries. So the argument is often, what is the need? We are a peaceful nation, and this notion about Hinduism being very peaceful, which I would say is a mal-informed notion. But Hindus are very peaceful. We've never attacked anyone. So because our politics is intertwined with religion, I'm bringing this up, and it is important because there's no separating politics from our everyday lives, and there is even in education. The way our students are protected from this, that's also another reason why so many, as adults, they turn into people who are not interested, who do not want to engage in politics, who do not want to respond to the injustice or the wrongs that are happening around them, because we've not equipped them, we've not taught them to think along those lines, we have not given them the vocabulary or the tools to deal with the everyday violence that goes on around in our society. Coming to Galton's violence triangle, you can see here the first diagram where I'm pointing. The top half is the point of direct violence, and the bottom is 2 points are structural violence and cultural violence. This is really beautifully explained by way of this the second diagram in the form of an iceberg. So it is the direct violence that most of us always react or respond to. So direct violence can be defined as direct physical hurt or intimidation or abuse, verbal, emotional. That is all direct violence. That is what happens when that happens around us. That's when we start thinking about peace or solutions for peace, or agencies like the police or the army or the UN. People are brought in at that point only when direct violence starts happening around us. That then there's a need to have ceasefire or peace accords and so on and so forth. But we pay very little attention to the structural and the cultural violence, which is the bottom of the iceberg and which is the much huger chunk. An example of structural violence could be, a good example could be poverty. See, now people who are born poor in poor circumstances, right? They're not responsible for their poverty. But if a state does nothing to say address that, or has equitable solutions to offer, the state is continuing to support structures of violence. Is the volume? I don't know. Is it better now?
It's good. It's good.
Okay. So, so that is an example of structural violence, because that's a huge chunk at the bottom of the iceberg that we are not seeing, especially people like us in positions of privilege. Here I am sitting in an airport going to catch a flight with my laptop and my internet connection. I'm someone who is in a I'm an upper caste Hindu, so I fall in I'm part of a system, I'm part of a structure that perpetuates violence. And unless I'm speaking up against these structural inequalities, I am also a perpetrator of that kind of violence. I may not be directly responsible, but these are things that we need to speak about with our students. And the other is cultural violence, which has far more ready examples, this demonization of a certain community. And I'm going to name it. I'm going to say how, we have Islamophobia is rampant in India and in many other places across the world. We generalize so easily. We are surrounded by propaganda. There are channels and channels and papers that are uh, dedicated to creating propaganda like that. And that is the infliction of cultural violence upon a certain community. At the beginning of COVID, again, for example, how Muslims were thought of as the people who were responsible for bringing the disease. And it's interesting, I was at a talk a couple of days ago, and I thought this was unique to India, but no, this blaming of the minorities, it's a universal phenomenon. In Bangladesh, for instance, there was a lot of hatred against the Hindu community who were blamed for bringing the disease in. In the US, Asians were targeted for bringing the disease in. So it's this is the kind of cultural violence that happens, which ultimately boils over and results in direct violence over a longer period of time. So how we think about violence, unless we acknowledge and understand these underlying forms of violence, we are not going to be able to talk about peace. So I think this is an important way in which teachers especially should approach peace education within schools. Sudeep wants to know, you can name the cultural. Yeah. Thank you, Sudeep. All right, moving on. This is an important part of our vocabulary. So if and when, if there are teachers here, parents here, take the chance, use the chance and acquaint your children with these are very simple concepts. Garton's violence triangle and Garton's idea of positive and negative peace. introduce your children to these ideas, and so that they can start thinking differently about violence. It's not only when there are guns involved. It's not only when people are killed. Violence is everywhere in the structures in our societies. The caste system is a case of structural violence, and it's been there for centuries, and we are still not doing anything about it. So we're surrounded by it. Then moving on to slightly more concrete examples for teachers, since we're doing this for an association with Teachers Plus. This is where the peace pedagogy in the school bit comes in. So the NEP 2020, which has been vastly contested and also appreciated, for different reasons. One of its clauses, 11.8, which I have pasted here. If I may read this out, or I'll just point it with my mouse. It's a big paragraph. Can we see the words here? Peace, Shanti, Dharma, Satya, Prem, Ahimsa. So the stress on value-based education. So the NEP makes provisions within our school systems to to offer education that is geared towards the values like these. Now I know that we've had value education for a very long time. Even when I was young in my school, value education was. I'm sorry. Uma says it defeats the attention.
Yeah, Urmi, I think that's okay. I don't think you should pay attention to the
okay.
chat
No,
window for
I'm
now.
only
Just
worried
go ahead.
because
Yeah.
no, because it's now Anjali saying she can't see the PPT. I'm just keeping my eye on because of the feedback issues. Anyway, I'll come to the questions later. You're right. Can you see the PowerPoint, Usha?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the NEP
Okay.
2020 slide.
Yes. So all I was saying is it makes the provision, the NEP 2020 makes provision to introduce peace education in PPT stuck according to Prakash. What? Usha, do you want to run this for me?
Yeah, I can do
You
that.
have a
Why don't? Yeah, but I can see it. So it's possible that it's a connection issue at his end.
Okay.
Anuja also says she can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think
Right.
you should go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's all I wanted to point out, that there are provisions now, and it's up to us how we creatively use this provision to start include peace education within our curriculums. Moving on. So now how do we translate it into pedagogy? Now, one of the important aspects of the NEP is, that the stress on the development of a global curriculum. Is Prashant handling this? Because it says you are viewing Prashant's screen.
No. I'm viewing. Looks like I'm viewing your screen.
I don't know why does it. For me, it says you're viewing Prashant's screen. See, now it's changed. It wasn't. Okay, never mind. I wanted to be on the slide, so now we are here. Good.
Okay.
So yes. So the fact that that our curriculum should now be global in approach. Yes, I shall share the PPT later. And because peace and conflict is something that is global in nature. There's not one nation that is not bothered by it, that doesn't need to do anything. Right. So when India wants to say level up with curriculums across the world, peace education becomes an important parameter. So it's not, so that is how it's different from value education. So we've had value education provision in our schools for a really long time, but here is the difference, that we need to scale it up now and treat it with the kind of importance value education as a subject has never received. We've always treated value education like this, side subject, which, some which really nobody bothers and has no it has no value. Uh, Ironically, value education has very little value in our education system because it does not serve a capitalist purpose. You know, it will not help you find a job. It will not create a career for you. But you see, you can become a peace educator. That's that's a prospect I'm sharing with you all right now. So if you all need to start peace education and tell your students why they must do it, here is a career opportunity. But here is also a problem, like when we speak of structural violence, capitalism is also a form of structural violence. We have to recognize that. While I'm not suggesting we give it up completely, but being aware of it and how it perpetuates inequity, both social and economic in society. This is something our students need to be made aware of, because again, that is a form of violence. And as when you speak of peace education, it has to be 360-degree. I'll come to a model of peace education in the next slide, but for the moment I just wanted to highlight some of these points. And then again, when we say of global curriculum development, then suddenly this whole stress on digital tech and virtual reality, artificial intelligence, we want to internationalize ourselves in on those lines. But what about human tech? Religion or peace, these are also technologies. We think very narrowly when we think of technology. We think only in terms of devices, but human beings and our brains are the most complex and most fantastic devices in themselves. And there is value in telling our students and teaching our students where that comes from, because at the core of peace education is ethics and values. Without this, there is no peace education. Unless we teach our students the importance of, say, the universal dignity of human beings as a non-negotiable value, they are not going to care about peace. They are not going to care about other people being oppressed, other people suffering. And again, it's not just about people getting killed. That's not the only violence. Peace is a much broader concept. Peace is about creating more equitable, just, harmonious societies. So how and so skills that need to be developed, and peace building is a skill. Like we teach our children computers from a very young age. Peace building is also something that we can teach our children from a very young age. What does that entail? It entails skills like deep listening. It entails things like empathy, mediation, skills around conflict resolution. Now, these are subjects in them. I'm not going to go into details, but are we teaching our children this? Our education has and our culture is also very hierarchical, very patriarchal. We don't really treat our children as equals. So it starts from us. Can a teacher, for example, listen? Start with the teacher. I know there are 60 students in our class, not always possible. The intention has to be there. So to think of the child as an equal, to give them a patient ear, to deeply listen and not just to make your point. So these are skills that can be taught, within a peace education curriculum. This is actually what you need to teach. Further, there are, we have to reconfigure the way our students think. We have to tell them that more than debates. See, debates are extremely popular in schools. At least, I don't know what it's like now, but at least when I was in school, debates were extremely popular. Winning a debate is, it makes you stand out as an A student. But we need to be able to tell our students that, listen, dialogue is more important than debate. And what does that mean? It means that holding space is more important than winning. Someone can have a different idea than yours. You don't have to have the last word. You put your, and you put your word out. You have the right to speak, but so does the other. Let them speak. You hold the space. So so these are the values. This is the orientation that starts inculcating a value of a culture of peace. Then compassion is greater than competition. And for our students everywhere, everything is about competition and winning. How is a child who is raised with these values, how do we expect them to turn into empathetic individuals who care about peace? Because all they have been taught, the language that surrounds them is that of violence, that you have to win, you have to win, you have to, what does that mean? It means you have to put the other person down in some way. Only, because there is a hierarchy. We need to change the hierarchical model to, we need to create circles where everyone is placed equally and equitably, and ethical reflection. So I feel all of this is missing from our schools at the moment. We are only geared towards, training our children to earn money. And then, in the capitalist conquest for, what US does, it just walks over any country it wants, oil from or resources from, under the pretext of, peace. So the language of violence needs to change. That is what, peace education can mean a lot of different things, but it is the language of violence, the language of competition, the language of capitalism that needs to change. That is what peace pedagogy really means. As teachers, our contexts are different. We can contextualize, we can change it, we can adapt it, but it is the attitude that counts, right? Okay, moving on to the next slide. If Prashant, yes, thank you. So here is a holistic model for, there are many different models for peace education. This is what I think is good, is useful. Usha, am I doing good on time? Am I exceeding my time?
Yeah, I think you're okay. I think we can go for another 7-8 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to run through quickly. So here are the objectives of, this is called a flower petal model of peace education. The objectives being to value diversity, I'm just going to read out, increase democratic participation, to develop empathy, to understand consequences evolving from action, and to create peaceful environments. The second point is especially important because, we harp on democracy a lot, and democracy is a tool for peace. But then again, what does democracy mean? It's not just elections. Democracy looks different in every country. So do we have these discussions? One chapter in a civics book is not enough. The true spirit of democracy, what it means, because when we say every citizen has an equal right, but then, what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to be a peaceful citizen or a citizen that contributes? All of this, democratic rights are one thing, duties are also another thing. We don't speak of duties often enough, not except when it's in an extremely nationalistic sense and someone asks us to hoist a flag. That's duties towards the nation and as citizens of the world, and not just nations. The problem with nationalism that I have is it makes you very narrow in what you think you owe to the world. You feel you owe it only to people who share by accident of birth the same identity as you, be it your national identity or religious identity, whatever. But we owe it a lot more to our world. Anyway, so those are the objectives of peace education as a whole. And as you can see, the flower petal model, I like this model because it's overarching. So dismantling the culture of war, that's the most obvious and first, aspect of peace education. Obviously, when there's fire, we want to put out the fire first. That's the first thing. And then we start thinking of, creating buildings that are fireproof. So dismantling the culture of war is the first step. Justice and compassion, I've touched upon this already, so I'm not going to go deeper. Human rights and responsibilities, also I just spoke of rights and responsibilities in a democratic context. A cultural respect and reconciliation and solidarity, extremely important, because the way our country is at the moment, main sahi, baki sab galat is exactly how it's going. So, the respect for other people's cultures, whatever it may be extremely different from you. It may be even offensive to you. It's honestly your problem. If we get offended by something, it is, if we should reflect on ourselves as to why it is that what about it is disturbing us. It's not for the other person to change, it's for us to change our attitudes. So we don't talk about this enough. We are so quick to point fingers about what someone else is doing wrong, that self-reflection is sorely missing from our curriculum. This is again an extremely important petal of the peace education flower. Then living in harmony with the earth. Here comes the matter of intersections. Intersectionality is extremely important. Climate change is something that's affecting everyone. And when we talk about peace, it's not just about political peace with our neighboring nation. It is about peace with our environment. It is about, say, not littering is also an act of peace. Littering is an act of violence. If someone throws kachra on their beach, what I'm saying is, it's not that we don't teach our children to be clean, but do we teach our children that being clean, or having doing this, is an act of peace? Littering is an act of violence. We have to be able to re-articulate it in this manner if peace education is what we are aiming for. If we are trying to create a culture shift, our vocabulary has to change. So living in harmony with the earth is an important aspect. And a last and very important aspect, I feel, is cultivating inner peace. When I spoke of the definitions of peace at the beginning, I said, one was a personal definition, the other was social definitions. This peace with oneself is also an extremely important aspect of peace education. Because again, competition, the culture of competition does not allow us to be at peace with ourselves. We are constantly comparing, we are always shown the ways in which we are not enough. So this is also something teachers are responsible to equip their students with. It's not just subject matter. It's not just exams. How are you teaching them to cope with life itself? Life is harsh, life is difficult, and you don't have to win to survive. That's not the only way of surviving. You have to be at peace with yourself. So peace education is also, when we say a holistic peace model, education model should also have that inner harmony angle, right? Harmony with the others, harmony with the earth, harmony with ourselves. So these are important petals of the flower. I'm going to the next slide, which is a video. I don't know I'm still confused about whether this is my presentation of Prashant, because that's what I'm seeing, but I'm going to try and create this video.
Yeah, it is Prashant's screen. Yeah.
Prashant, can you make it full screen?
Can be important players in the search for peace. They may see opportunities for resolving conflict. Young people can be important players in the search for peace. They may see opportunities for resolving conflict that are beyond the imagination of their elders. They are less burdened with traumas of the past. And as future leaders, they are motivated to shape the world they will inherit. Seeds of Peace, which is supported by the Institute, is a unique summer camp experience for young people on both sides of conflict. It prepares young leaders from Israel and the Palestinian territories to think afresh about one of the world's most enduring conflicts. Graduates of the Seeds Camp have gone on to become peace builders in their home communities. Here is one story.
My name is Tamar Whitus. I'm 17 years old. I'm a religious Jew, and I'm from Rehovot, Israel. Growing up, we didn't have that many ideas about Palestinians or the conflict. Once I got older, I started getting more interested in news, and that's when I started hearing about the other side.
My name is Suma Al-Qawasmi. I'm 17 years old. I'm Palestinian from Jerusalem. I live in Sheikh Jarrah. We have a lot of problems with Israeli soldiers, governments, because they want to take the land.
This whole land, many religious people feel like there's nothing here that you can compromise, and as long as the other side wants that land, there's nothing we can do.
I wanted to come to the Seeds of Peace camp because I want to see how the other side, Israeli, think about us.
The main problem of this conflict is you just don't know the other side. I had no idea what the other side was like. I barely knew what my side was like.
I used to think that Israeli, they are bad person, I can't communicate with them, I can't talk to them, I can't share anything with them. We sit and we share ideas, opinion. We don't have to accept the other side opinions, just we have to listen to them and to understand.
It started off as very loud yelling.
I know we have different opinions, but it's okay. I know now that I can listen to them.
It was very important for me personally to hear the personal stories. What's bothering me, what I feel, what is my hurt, what is happening back at home.
We feel that we are equal. It makes it more possible to talk and to share.
The main thing of how people can go out with trust is, hey, I just had a good time. I caught myself laughing with this person, and then I suddenly realized, wait a second, this is the person that I yelled at an hour ago, and that just gives you the opportunity to see the person underneath. Coming back from camp, I started with a sense of I need to teach them and I need to show them no matter what they think.
I spoke with other people, like my friends, my neighbors. Maybe the thing which I can do now is spread the opinions that Israeli, they are human beings the same as us.
Young people are more important to peacemaking because they still have enough of an open mind to learn. I mean, we haven't started our path in life yet, so we can choose to go on a path of working towards it.
You can say that they are the future, so they can achieve something.
Yeah, so that was like a little video of what the Seeds of Peace camp looks like. But I shared it to give you an idea of how it can be transformative when we inculcate whatever means we choose something that we can do, and it may feel inconsequential, but in the long run, if you change the mind of a youngster, tomorrow when they will be in positions of power, and maybe they'll make a difference somewhere. So it's a continuous process, but it is our attitude that needs to change. And a few days from now, which is celebrated as World Peace Day. UN has a lot of these commemorations. 2nd October is International Day of Nonviolence. Of course, it's Gandhiji's birthday. Then we have things like the International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace. So rather than just mentioning, in passing that today is World Peace Day, create an event around it. Have a small interactive session. Tell your students to talk about it, discuss. So there are ways and means to do it, where you may not be in a position to create a course right away, but you can start as soon as 21st September. That's a great place to begin. And like I said, there are so many ways to doing it, contextualize, customize, but it also needs to start with yourself. And in the next slide, Prashant, I have I have shared a bunch of resources that I think will be really useful, especially for teachers. There is one organization called History for Peace, which is part of Seagull Publishing in Kolkata. They've been doing a lot of work. They use history, because most of our histories are about war. They've changed this paradigm. They use history to teach peace. So that's the first resource, and there are many more that I've listed here that feel free to visit, download. These are all free resources, and that I think that would be a great start. So I will stop here. That's about it. Prashant, you can go to the last slide, which says thank you. And after that, we can have Usha talk to me for some time, and if anyone has any questions, I will try my best to answer from this very noisy airport.
Yeah, you can probably come back on camera if that works. Great. Yeah. Shivani, how are we doing on time? Can we take a few questions?
Yeah, we will. Just before we go to move to the question answer, I would now like to request the audience to take 30 seconds to answer a poll. The purpose of the poll is to help us understand you a little better so we can better curate the topics that we are going to bring to you in future. You can also let us know in the chat box how you found out about Vishwa Talks. If you are a Vishwa Talks subscriber, you found out about the event on social media. While you take the survey, I would like to thank Ms. Usha Raman, Urmi Chanda, both of you. This is such a pertinent topic to our current times, at a time when media is very polarized. The social media that comes across, there's sections of society which gets one kinds of media and another section gets another kind of media, and each has their own opinions. Each is not willing to listen to the other person's opinion. We are a ripe ground for war, for conflict, for rioting, at such an important time, you all have come out with a very beautiful webinar, and the video was so inspiring. It was amazing. A much needed topic for us to consciously bring this back to our younger generation. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the participants. I would like to really express to everybody who has joined us today for their presence. And now we will start off the question and answer session because the speaker will not be able to stay with us for long. So, yeah, there is one, Ms. Uma Kalyani Kumar. Can you please share the resource page again? We will post it to y'all. We will mail it to y'all also. Prashant, you can still share the slide, the resource slide. Yeah, it's in the chat box. You can have a look at it.
I think there's a raised hand from Anjali.
Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for that talk, quite enlightening. My question is about, it's more out of curiosity than anything else. You mentioned in your presentation about deep listening and, empathy. Also, we do get to hear words like in our conversations, especially if we are, studying in colleges and schools, we hear words like Islamophobia. I was wondering if, in a culture of dialogue, without throwing words around which may just shut up certain people who may have different points of view. It is true that Islamophobia exists. It is true different kinds of marginalizations exist. But if we explain those things without using these words, I would say that the dialogue is richer and a little less, sort of naming and shaming kind of thing. I don't know what you have to say about that.
I completely agree, Anjali. I use those. Some disturbance. Anjali, can you mute yourself? I think I can. Yeah. So yes. So what I was saying is, I use those terms for ease of communication in a short window of time. But say in seeds of peace, how we do it. We say, there are programs on dialogue, there are programs on, say, critical media literacy, there are programs on interfaith harmony. So you have to package it and present it correctly, of course, without being accusatory, because we're all, like I said, perpetrators. No koi doodh ka dula nahi hai. So we're all equally responsible for what is happening in our society, and we need to take notes. And no one's blaming anybody So as peace educators, as teachers, we will have to watch what we say. We will have to make our forums as inclusive as possible because, again, the use of terms like these, very terms like these are that is violence also. So of course, that has to be taken care of, and that is what a peace educator would be able to do. That is what all these curriculums, that resources that you have, they'll help you structure your lessons or whatever it is that you intend to do in ways that that doesn't say name and shame anyone. So yes, there are ways to do it. I hope I've answered this.
Just wanted to acknowledge Lalita Ramdas, who's of course one of the peace heroes, right? Who's been doing a lot of work in the subcontinent, particularly between communities in India and Pakistan. So there's a question from Prakash, who's asking about caste violence. For instance, the kind of thing we saw happen in Rajasthan. And in your experience, have you, found ways in which teachers can deal with these sorts of incidents?
Very unfortunate for the teacher who, committed this act of violence, I think. So, patriarchy, casteism, these are all very deeply rooted things in all of us. And
We've lost you.
Usha ma'am, while Urmi gets connected, wanted to ask you, do we have workshops in and around Hyderabad which can be made available to schools, one, number two, or camps across the country where people can send their children in the holidays to address this particular issue at such a crucial point?
I'm sure there are people, but yeah, Urmi is back, I think. Are you?
So you can take it. Yeah, sorry, network dropped off for a moment.
This was just a question about camps or workshops in the Hyderabad region. And, we can certainly do some sort of scanning to see if anybody's doing this sort of thing. But there are individuals I know who work on these aspects and possibly who could put together workshops. But maybe Urmi can also speak to that. Are you?
I'm not very. Yeah. I was going back to the last question. I was saying, about the casteism. These are.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think she's lost connection again. But if I'm not wrong, I think she was just making the comment that, casteism, patriarchy, these are all, of course, parts of structural violence, right? And which is much more difficult to address than the more obvious politically motivated violence that we see at the macro level. I think it's difficult to answer a question like that in a few minutes. And I think, like Urmi said, each of these aspects of violence, right, whether it is political violence between nations or caste-based violence at the societal level, or at the micro level, right, the kind of violence that happens within homes and within communities, I think each of those probably requires a different approach or a slightly nested approach. And one of the things that really struck me, from what Urmi was talking about was the fact that we first need to acknowledge our own roles as perpetrators at some level. If not perpetrators, at least people who support, and by not acting, not do anything about what is going on. Yeah, so now you're back, so you can take it over.
I don't know, the internet has a problem with the last question. It just keeps going off every time. So yeah, that's all I have to say, that, that These are difficult conversations, but these need to be had with our children. What happens in privileged societies and upper caste schools. I'm going to call them upper caste schools because we know a certain demographic comes in these privileged society, and because everyone's in the same boat, there's never any conversations about these. Token conversations are not enough. Peace building is a deeply uncomfortable and challenging subject. It needs us to question ourselves. It needs to pose these important questions, difficult questions to our children, and which somehow, it may bring a parent to your classroom saying, "What are you teaching my child? My child is now crying and asking me difficult questions." This is all part of the game. So it's a risk that needs to be taken, and it needs to be done. Otherwise, it's not going to solve itself, because we've allowed these systems of inequality and injustice to perpetuate for a really, really long time. And if we're talking about peace building here, if we're all here, on this forum, it means that we care about this subject. And it has to be one step at a time. And again, everyone's not equipped to do the same kind of things. Everyone cannot be same comfortable. So do what you can within your capacity. You don't have to turn into an activist overnight. You don't have to change 360 degrees of your whatever your approach to education is. But the first and most important step is awareness. We are aware, then we pass it on to others. When we're able to call out things that are problematic, we're able to point out, in the media with the news examples. It's everywhere. It's all around us.
There was one question from Jane Sahi about whether the arts and the imagination are approaches in creating a culture. How do you see the role of imagination and the arts in creating a culture of peace? Oops, we've lost Urmi again, I think.
Go back. Yeah, I have to also go. I'm happy though, Usha, Shivani, to take questions. I'm happy for my email to be shared. I know this is extremely inconvenient for everyone, and my deep apologies for that. But I'm happy to engage, with anyone and take any questions once I'm back home and with some decent internet connection.
Yeah, so maybe that's what we'll do. We can collect the questions in the chat and send them to you, because I think this is going to keep happening, and your announcement for boarding is going to come soon.
Yes.
So maybe we should end it there. Acknowledge the questions. Thanks everybody for your engagement, because this is really a problem that it's an issue that requires a long dialogue, both among educators and among those that we seek to influence. So we'll take these questions, send them on to Urmi, and maybe she can write back directly to those who have posed the questions, if that's okay. So I'll turn it back to Vishwa, and maybe we can end here.
Sure. Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about Vishwa. Vishwa is an online platform for everyday change makers and social champions. It's a crowdfunding and a crowdsourcing platform that is aimed at helping anyone to find the support they need in their efforts to have their dreams for themselves, for the others, to make our world a better place. The vision behind, we are also coming out with Vishwa Junior Talks and Vishwa Talks for Youth. And the vision behind it is the privileged schools like Rishi Valley and all had eminent people coming and talking to them for an hour or so once a month. We wanted to make this available to all the schools, whether it is government, whether it is schools in the villages, whether it's schools in towns. We would like them to be exposed like the speakers that we just had, Miss Usha Raman, Miss Urmi, so that they get a better understanding of the world around them, and they're able to have the exposure, the wisdom to have clarity and to think. So these thought-provoking talks, we want them to extend the curiosity for explanation to our youth and young ones. So Please stay up to date when we launch our first Vishwa Talks Youth and Junior programs by subscribing to our emailers or checking up regularly on our website. We also have a material vertical. It's an initiative where we're proud to introduce. Imagine living in an economy where sharing is truly caring, and whatever you don't need, whether it be books, electronics, furniture, could easily be listed and picked up by members of the community. The idea is that nothing goes to waste. There is something for everyone. It's a crowdsourcing platform for local communities to list and exchange all for free. With this, we will close this session. Thank you so much to each of you for being here. And on such a critical topic, I can see a lot of people have come and participated. All your questions, we will pass on to the speaker and send you all back. Thank you so much. With this, we end the session. Thank you, Ms. Usha. Thank you, Ms. Urmi, for this wonderful session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
The next upcoming session, let me just give you a little about it. As you can all see, today we had the last 3 days blasting rains, cloud bursts, and we have noticed that, rains which should be coming over 4 months are coming in a period of 2 days. And this does not allow the water to go right down into our earth and conserve the water. It instead wipes out the topsoil, creates havoc, and we are responsible for what's happening around us. We have our speaker upcoming in the next weekend. We have Mr. Salaluddin Saifi. I have personally met him, and his knowledge on water management is very thorough. It is very important because environment, we have noticed, has very limited. People are not much interested in the environment around us, but we are going to be in for a great trouble unless we understand what is happening. As long as we're getting drinking water in our homes, we're fine. We don't know at what cost we're getting it and what are the consequences 10 years down the line. So we really wish that each of you, and please pass it on to your friends and family, to come and see this webinar on 17th September, Saturday at 11 a.m. It's extremely critical. Thank you so much.
Please stay back, Usha ma'am and Shivani ma'am for breakout.
Yeah.
Usha ma'am, please join room 1. Are you able to? Yeah.
నేను జిల్లా పరిషత్ ఉన్నత పాఠశాల తోటపల్లి ప్రధాన ఉపాధ్యాయునిగా ఇక్కడ గత 7 సంవత్సరాలుగా పనిచేస్తున్నాను. ఈ పాఠశాలలో ప్రభుత్వం నుంచి ఉన్నటువంటి టాయిలెట్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో అవి పిల్లలకు సరిపోయినంతగా లేవు. మొత్తం 223 ఉన్నటువంటి స్ట్రెంత్లో 128 మంది అమ్మాయిలే ఉన్నారు ఈ పాఠశాలలో. సో ఇక్కడ ఇంతమందికి గర్ల్స్ మనం ఎప్పుడైతే టాయిలెట్స్కి వదిలినప్పుడు ఆ పిల్లలంతా ఒకేసారి టాయిలెట్స్ ఉన్నన్ని టాయిలెట్స్ లేవు. మా పాఠశాలకు టాయిలెట్స్ విత్ రన్నింగ్ వాటర్ ఫెసిలిటీతో చేయగలిగితే పిల్లలందరికీ ఉపయోగకరంగా ఉంటుందని